am really, really excited to announce this next speaker. Arianna Huffington is someone that I really greatly admire. I hope you guys learn from her as much as I have in the past. She's actually spoken at LinkedIn, and I like to do some research before I introduce somebody. She is the president and editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post Media Group. I follow her on LinkedIn. I watch her when she speaks. What I love about her, what she's about to talk about, is not only what does success look like in the traditional sense, but is the third metric. It's about well-being. And there was a quote in one of the books that I was looking at. It's about leaning back versus leaning in. And everyone that has a really high rec load, I'm sure there's a couple of you out there that has a really high rec load, those of us that work long hours, she is giving a great perspective about how to manage all of that in our lives. So without further ado, my honor to introduce Arianna Huffington.
Thank you so much. What an amazing 3 days you've had. I was lucky enough to meet with a few of you backstage and to hear some of the stories of what you've learned and what I learned from you already. And I'm just thrilled to be here. For those of you who haven't heard me before, this accent is for real. I joked recently that I was really born in Fresno, California, and I cultivated this accent to give myself an air of being an ethnic minority, which is popular everywhere except in Arizona. But the truth is that I was born in Greece, and I suppose if anybody recruited me there and asked me, what do you want to be doing down the road, I would never have thought of what I'm actually doing, which is an interesting part of all our lives. That change has become such an integral part of everything we're doing that it's very hard now to have 5-year and 10-year plans. And that's what I love about the alliance idea of collaboration and building the brand of the employee at the same time that you build loyalty in the company. But the reason I'm so excited to be speaking to you is because you are the group that can take all the changes that are already happening around the world about our workplaces, about what we value at work, about what we value among the talent that we are recruiting, and accelerate them dramatically, because you are right there. You are in the middle of where the changes are happening. So I just want to say a few things, first of all, about these changes. For the first time in the last few years, the last couple of years really, we have a growing awareness about the incredible price we've been paying because of the way we have set up our workplaces. Basically, our workplaces were designed by men, though none of the men present here, you're all excluded from everything I have to say about men, other men. And they are based on the principle that success and productivity are fueled by sleep deprivation, burnout, and exhaustion, right? How often do we congratulate people at work for working 24/7, which is something I urge you to stop doing. I don't mean stop working 24/7. I mean definitely stop doing that, but also stop congratulating people for what effectively it means is congratulating them for coming to work drunk. That is really what is amazing about this time we're living in. We now have scientific evidence that shows that in terms of our cognitive performance, sleep deprivation has the same impact. And yet it's been glamorized, especially by men. I had dinner with a guy recently who bragged. He said, I slept 4 hours the night before. And I thought to myself, I didn't say it, but I wanted to say, you know what? If you had slept 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting. So this is the time for us to shift our collective delusion that success has to be fueled by burnout. I recently had my own wake-up call, not that recently, actually 7 years ago, when I actually collapsed from exhaustion, burnout, and sleep deprivation. And those of you who got a copy of Thrive, my latest book, Backstage, know that that's how I start the book. Because I collapsed, I hit my head on the way down, broke my cheekbone, got 4 stitches on my right eye. And that was the beginning of my starting this journey, redefining what success is. Because our culture has shrunken success down to these 2 metrics of money and power. And this is basically like trying to live on a 2-legged stool. You know, sooner or later you're going to fall off. We need that 3rd metric, which consists of these 4 pillars of our well-being. We already talked about that a little. Wisdom, wonder, and giving. So here's what is interesting about wisdom. Increasingly, the people you want to attract to your organizations are people whose judgment you value. People are not valued so much for their stamina as their judgment, right? Increasingly, as technology is taking over more and more functions, we want people with good judgment, who are creative, who are productive, and these are the people we want to attract. And yet, our whole emphasis traditionally has been on stamina. Not just among businesses, but also in Washington, D.C. You know, there are all these stories of people working in the White House who would go home at night, but they would leave the lights in their offices on, and they would leave their jackets draped over their desk chairs, so people thought they never left. And yet, as Bill Clinton said, the most important mistakes I made in my life, he said, I made when I was tired. Now, he did not specify what mistakes. But can't we all identify with that? I can certainly identify. The most important hiring mistakes I made when I was tired. How about you? You know, when you're going down your to-do list, and this job has been open for a long time, and you want to cross this off your to-do list, and yes, there are some things that you don't really like about this candidate, and the resume, though, is very good, and so you shut up your intuition. You know, that voice that is telling us things about the red flags that may not be in the resume, that may not be in what the candidate is saying, but that you know, in that sense that we call intuition, that goes beyond our rational brain, that something isn't quite right, it isn't quite the right fit. Every time I have overruled that part of my mind, I have made a mistake. And that's why I liked what Google is doing now, taking as much time as is needed. I have a rule at the Huffington Post: I am the last interview of every single person we hire. We have 850 people. I'm the last interview of the lowliest assistant editor of any position, because I want to be able to talk to everybody we're bringing into the family. Because it is a family. Even though the members of the family may move on to other jobs, other tours of duty, I love that, they will remain members of the family. We have a completely open door policy at the Huffington Post. People may go on to other jobs, and so far, in our 9 years in existence, so many people have gone and come back. And they know that the door is always open. In fact, one of the things that I do to strengthen that idea of the family is that when we were only 5 people in 2005 when we launched, I bought everybody sweaters for Christmas, and I've continued the tradition. So now people can count how long they've been at HuffPost by how many Christmas sweaters they have. I'm like a 7-sweater person, somebody would say. Well, this year, okay, I can say that, but don't tell anybody who works at HuffPost, it's a surprise. We are not giving them sweaters, we are giving them pajamas. Because we want to emphasize the importance of sleep when it comes to creativity and productivity. So we just had a lot of fun picking pajamas, multiple fashion designers from Calvin Klein to others making woolly fun pajamas. And also, in case you don't know, at the Huffington Post we have 2 nap rooms. So anybody can go and recharge in the middle of the afternoon if they're tired. You know who uses it a lot? People who recently had children. Fathers and mothers, you see them disappearing into the nap room, and I love that. At first, there was a lot of skepticism, like people were looking at each other saying, who is going to be seen walking into a nap room in the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of New York City, the city that never sleeps? Well, in fact, Winston Churchill coined the term power nap. Why? Because that's how you can go back to work recharged. And isn't that what we need more than anything? So Pat mentioned about leaning back. I think we're much more effective at leaning in after we've leaned back. It's like a cat. You know how the cat, before they jump, they sort of go back and then they jump higher? It's the same thing with human beings. But for some reason, in our culture, we began to think we had to be on 24/7. But if you go even back to the creation of heaven and earth, remember, God worked very hard for 6 days and then took the 7th day off. And one of my role models, Padma Warrior, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Cisco. Anybody from Cisco there? How great is she? Perfect. Love Padma. She spoke at our Thrive conference and she said, I sleep for 8 hours. I meditate, I paint, I write haikus, and every Saturday I do a digital detox. And I thought to myself, if God can take a day off and Padma Warrior can do a digital detox every Saturday, so can I. And one of the problems that I'm sure you're all dealing with and your teams are dealing with is our over-addiction to technology. So now, because we can be wired all the time, we never really have to leave the office. And that's a big problem that more and more companies around the world are recognizing. In Germany, for example, the labor minister, she's now the defense minister, but when she was the labor minister, she did a whole study of the impact of burnout on the German economy. And she found that it cost the German economy tens of billions of euros. So she urged the companies to do something about it. And they've been very enterprising. Volkswagen gives middle managers company phones that are automatically turned off at 6 p.m. and turned on at 7 a.m. This is their time to unplug and recharge. And it goes very much against the grain of our expectation, even our expectation from ourselves, that we have to be on all the time. We have to respond to emails and texts right away. In fact, do you know that we take better care of our smartphones than we take care of ourselves? We know how much battery remains in our smartphones, right? And if it gets kind of below 20%, when we get these alerts, 17% of battery remaining, we get really anxious. And we look around for a recharging shrine. You know, lest something would happen to our precious smartphones. Well, when I collapsed from exhaustion and burnout, I must have been below 0% battery remaining. But I wasn't even aware of it. If you had said to me, how are you? I would have said, fine. And if you go right now to Google, don't go right now to Google because I don't believe in multitasking. Incidentally, multitasking does not exist according to the latest science. Multitasking is really the most stressful thing you can do, and it's really task switching. But that's another story. I'll get back to that in a minute. But if you go to Google and you begin to type the question, why am I? Do you know what is the Google autocomplete? Why am I so tired? And do you know what is the second most common autocomplete? Why am I always tired? And I've been going around the world because the Huffington Post is launching in different countries. I was in Australia, I was in Germany, as I mentioned. Wherever you are, you get the same answer. So this is a global crisis. A Belgian philosopher, Pascal Chabot, called burnout the disease of civilization. And so what that means is that we are addicted to this way of living. And that's why in Thrive, I have 12 steps that we can take to basically reclaim our lives. Now, I know there are a lot of type A people in this room. Please don't try and do all 12 steps at once. You pick the one step that most resonates with you and start with that. I'm just going to mention 3 of the 12 steps. The first one, the one that I started with on my own journey away from burnout, is at the end of each day, get 30 minutes more sleep than you are getting now, unless you're one of these people who already gets all the sleep they need. And that may mean simply not watching Jon Stewart. Or if you're tempted, let's say, to binge watch The House of Cards, then you need to get a sleep sponsor or a Thrive buddy. And you can call them up and say, you know, I'm just really, really tempted to binge watch House of Cards. And your sponsor will talk you down and say, now calm down, close your laptop. You can watch it over the weekend. Because isn't it the most wonderful feeling when you wake up in the morning and you are feeling ready to go? Instead of waking up in the morning and feeling completely exhausted and wishing you could go back to bed. I was talking to Professor Ronenberg in Munich recently. He's done some of the most cutting-edge research on sleep. And he says it's very simple to know when you've got enough sleep. You wake up without an alarm. You can overeat, but you cannot oversleep. And yet, so many of us are completely incapable of waking up without an alarm. The second step is very simple, but hard for many people. And this is, at the end of the day, turn off all your devices and gently escort them out of your bedroom. How many of you sleep with their iPhone or Android or BlackBerry charging by your bed? Okay, not good. The science is incontrovertible. If you sleep with your phone by your bed and you wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, you are going to be tempted to look at your data, right? And when you look at your data, A, it's going to take you longer to go back to sleep, and B, your sleep isn't going to be as deep and recharging, which is precisely what you need more than anything. So, charging your devices outside the bedroom creates like a device-free zone where you can really reconnect with yourself and your own wisdom. Every human being has in them that place of strength, wisdom, peace. And that's the place from which the most creative ideas come from. And increasingly, the people you want to attract to your companies are the most creative people. The most creative people are not burnt out. When you're burnt out, you can still clear your email box, you can still do transactional things, but trust me, you're not going to come up with great ideas. In fact, Forbes had a really interesting article recently about how Silicon Valley notoriously talks about the startup culture of sleep deprivation. And yet we know that 3/4 of startups fail. So maybe there's a connection. Maybe if people got more sleep and recharged themselves, that doesn't mean not being intense and passionate about what you're doing. It just means not walking through life like a zombie. And if you look at some of the greatest role models, the people that have changed the world, they have talked again and again about the importance of reconnecting to that place of strength and wisdom in them. Look at Steve Jobs. He told his biographer, Walter Isaacson, that some of the best ideas that led to the iconic Apple products came after Zen meditation. They came, as he put it, when he could quieten his mind and therefore be able to hear what he said, more subtle things. So that's the kind of culture. When we encourage it in our offices and in our companies, we also encourage the most creative part of our employees to come forward. We are doing a lot of things around that at the Huffington Post. For example, we have asked people not to bring devices, laptops, etc., to meetings. Because you know what happens? People are not really in the meeting, they are clearing their email boxes. So we're saying, unless you're taking notes, and there is one designated person taking notes and then sends them to everybody else, we gave everyone beautiful notebooks. And they can write something in their notebook. But be present. My own leadership meetings have gone from 1 hour to half an hour. Because everybody's present, 100% present, unitasking, not multitasking. When I stopped multitasking, including, walking down the street, I live in New York, and now you can hardly walk down the street in New York and not see everybody either on the phone or texting while walking and bumping into people. And then here's the worst part. They kind of expect you, the other person who is not texting and walking, to get out of the way. Because clearly, if you're just walking, you can't be really important. Because, people wear their busyness like a badge of honor. I'm just so busy, I cannot possibly just walk. So you insignificant person just walking, just get out of the way. I remember when I first started just walking, I noticed this most beautiful building next to my apartment. And I said to a friend of mine that I was with, I said, this is so beautiful. I said, when did this building go up? And she said, 1890. So what else are we missing in life? And that's really the third pillar. We talked about well-being and sleep and recharging. We talked about wisdom and good decision-making. The third is wonder. Life is full of wonder, full of ordinary beauties that we miss, full of special moments that we miss. And when we actually learn to be fully present, that's when we can begin to recapture that. Creating these little spaces in our day is so important, and creating them in our offices. We have created like quiet rooms where people can go and just be quiet. We have created places for meditation. We have regular meditation classes, yoga classes. This sends a message to everyone that we value you as a human being. And that when you are at your best, when you operate from a place of well-being and strength, it's going to be better for the company. Right now, we see the correlation between the well-being of employees and the bottom line of the company. And we have data to prove it. You know, Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, I don't know if there's anybody from Aetna here, but he had his own wake-up call when he broke his neck in a skiing accident. And then he discovered meditation, yoga, acupuncture that helped him be able to function again. And he made them available to his 49,000 employees. And then he brought Duke University in to study the impact. And they found a 7% reduction in healthcare costs and a 69-minute-a-week improvement in productivity. So what is great is that now we can measure the impact. And you know that when you can measure it, you can actually change it much faster because you have the data to back you up. And I believe that the companies that are actually bringing these changes faster are the companies that are going to attract the best talent. And they're going to be able to retain that talent. And also attract the kind of talent that comes up with the best next ideas. And the kind of environment where there is no hierarchy, where a good idea can come from the intern, or it can come from the CEO. That's what we are trying to encourage, and that is the kind of culture that is going to completely win the future. Because I mentioned Steve Jobs, but throughout history, we've seen some of the greatest inventions and innovations happen during quiet times. I love the story of Newton. You know, he came up with the law of gravity while sitting in his garden having a cup of tea, and that apple fell, and he made all the connections. Why do you get some of your best ideas in the shower? Because most of us do not take a smartphone to the shower. Although I hate to bring the news to you, but Android now has a waterproof phone, which I think is going to completely affect our ability to create, because now we're going to be answering texts in the shower, as opposed to simply not remembering how many times we washed our hair, which is what happens to me when you start thinking, and you don't remember, now did I wash my hair? Once, twice. So I was interviewing Eckhart Tolle on stage here at the Moscone Center at the Salesforce conference last week. And I had dinner with him that night, and I love him because he really lives what he preaches about being present and being in the moment. And so he said, I'm going to send you a spacing. I said, what's a spacing? He said, instead of texting you, I'm going to send you a spacing, just a square bracket, nothing, and a square bracket. And when you get that, is the moment to just take a moment and take a breath and not do anything. So what do you think if we start that as a trend? We can start sending each other spacings to remind each other to take a breath. You know how often we hold our breath when we are stressed? When I've now trained myself, anytime something happens that's stressful, to actually take a very deep inhale and a very deep exhale, because that helps ground us and bring us back into our own center. So all these tools are available to us right now. That is what is wonderful. We just have to create the space in our lives and the rituals in our lives to be able to tap into them and then re-energized return to our work. Also, if you think of it, have you been to a memorial service recently? I was at a memorial service. And when you go to a memorial service, it reminds you that our eulogies are very different than our LinkedIn profiles. Have you ever been to a memorial and heard anybody say, you know, George was amazing. He increased market share by 1/3. No, because what we eulogize people around are all the things that have more meaning in our lives, the things that we value, the way we made people feel, the things that made us laugh. And so it's good as we're building our resumes to also be building our eulogies. It's good to be working on both at the same time. In fact, when I was recently interviewed by Oprah, when my book Thrive came out, she asked me the same question that she asks everybody, which is, what do you know for sure? And I said, what I know for sure is that however magnificent your job may be, Oprah, or however great my job may be, or however great anybody else's job here may be, who we are as a human being is more magnificent. And when we really believe that, it just transforms our lives. Because it takes away a lot of the unnecessary stress around work. As leaders in our companies and organizations, it makes us appreciate each human being for who they are beyond what they do. And it really transforms the culture in which we are working. And of course, another thing, it is an incredible source of joy and happiness. You know, for a very long time, I thought the only thing that mattered in my life was to be effective, to get things done. How many people are like that here? Just get stuff done, right? And now, I don't think this is just enough. I want to actually be joyful while I'm getting stuff done. Why not? Why can't we get stuff done and also do it from a place of joy and happiness? You know what? You get stuff done better from that place. And that's why the pursuit of happiness was such a key part of America's founding, because it's incredibly significant. And in fact, we launched an app, you know, there is an app for that at the Huffington Post called GPS for the Soul. And when you are stressed, you can create your own little guide of the things that help you de-stress. It could be pictures of your children, landscapes, a piece of music, a piece of poetry. Mine is full of pictures of my 2 daughters when they were young and unproblematic. It has some of my favorite quotes. One of them is by Rumi, the poet who said, "Live life as though everything is rigged in your favor." Don't you love that? It means no matter what happens during the day or during the year, however unpleasant, just trust there is some hidden blessing which you may not realize or recognize until a long time down the road. But living life from that place of trust is pretty transformational. And playing that guide on your GPS for the soul, which takes under a minute, can just help you course correct. It can also allow some silence in our lives, because that's one of the hardest things. We've practically eliminated silence. You know, even when you go to have a massage now, they put music on. And they sound surprised if you say, "Can you turn this off? I would just like some silence." They think you're being antisocial. I, for example, used to walk into my apartment or walk into a hotel room and immediately turn off the TV. Because I thought otherwise I wouldn't know everything that's happening, and I run this 24/7 media company. And now I don't do that anymore. And you know what is amazing? First of all, I haven't missed a thing. And secondly, when I went back and turned on the TV 3 months after I hadn't turned on the TV, I remember it was quite a shock, because they were talking about exactly the same thing they had been talking 3 months earlier. Seriously, they were talking about Chris Christie and the bridge in New Jersey. And it seemed like a rerun. But so much of political television is a rerun. It's people regurgitating opinions. about things that often don't know very much. So how do you create these little places of sanctuary? Let me give you the third step. We talked about sleep. We talked about turning off our devices, not charging them by the bed. The third step that's been very important for me has been to do regular life audits, to see how many projects do we start in our heads that we don't really do anything about. If you're like me, a lot. So now that I do these regular life audits, I look at my projects and I feel, am I really going to do something about that or not? Because if I'm not, I realize that it is very liberating to know that you can complete a project by dropping it. So that's how I completed skiing, you know. I'm a terrible skier, and I really wanted to become a good skier because my daughters love to ski. And then I realized one day that, I'm never going to invest the energy and the time to becoming a good skier. So, as far as I'm concerned, skiing is done. Now, when I go skiing with my daughters, I sit by the fire, I drink a cup of hot chocolate, read a good book, and I'm very happy. More important, I don't have skiing cluttering my inner drive. And then I can focus on the things I'm really going to put my energy into. I'm going to say this especially to the women here. Did you know that no is a complete sentence? So often we are asked things, and we feel we have to say yes, right? Even though we don't want to do it. Because we don't want the other person not to like us, or we don't want them to disapprove of us. Bottom line is, if you're going to achieve things in an organization, in our lives, we need to be able to exclude things. We need to be able to focus and be undistracted while we're focusing. That's why I have 12 apps I recommend that can basically shut up all your incoming communications. If you want to sit down and write a blog, or even just write a memo, you don't want to be distracted by your messages. My favorite app is called Antisocial. It puts everything on hold. And then you can really just concentrate on what you're doing. And that focus is absolutely indispensable for creation. Nobody has created who was multitasking while they were creating. So if you take these 3 steps and fast track to the final pillar, which is giving, because every life and every organization has to include giving if it's going to be rich and multidimensional. And that's why I love what Jeff Weiner talks about, compassionate management, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, making giving part of your everyday life. And it doesn't have to be giving of money or even giving of time. It can be, how do we treat everybody we come into contact with? For me, it's very simple. If we can just make a personal connection with everybody we come into contact with. It can be the barista in the coffee shop, the cleaning crew in our office. Can we make a personal connection with them? My mother, to whom Thrive is dedicated, was the ultimate person like that. You could not go to the farmer's market with her or a shop to buy anything without her making a personal connection with the shop assistant. Anytime the FedEx man would come to our office to deliver something or our home, she would tell them, come in, sit down, I've baked something. I don't know if there are any Greeks here, but she was one of those Greek mothers who thought if you didn't eat every 20 minutes, something terrible would happen to you. And also she had no sense of hierarchy. And that is something that we are discovering is more and more important in modern offices and modern companies. My mother, I remember, I'll tell you a story of her lack of hierarchy. When I lived in London, you know, she always lived with me. That's not the reason I'm divorced. But she always did live with me, and she was like the Greek yaya to my daughters, the Greek grandmother. So when I lived in London in my 20s, I was dating a Tory member of parliament. It must have been a moment of sleep deprivation. And one night he brought Ted Heath to dinner. Ted Heath was then prime minister in England. And something went wrong with the stove in the kitchen, and my mother got a plumber to come and fix the stove, and she asked the plumber what he thought of the prime minister. And the plumber said, not much. He hasn't been good for working people. So my mother immediately said, oh, let me go bring him in so you can tell him directly. And it never occurred to her that she shouldn't do that. And I feel that we're living at a time now when networking, all that we are doing with our digital lives is really about the lack of hierarchy. It's the democratization of everything. At HuffPost, you can send a blog, as you can do for LinkedIn. I write for LinkedIn, and I write for HuffPost, because the other great thing now is that it's not about exclusivity. In fact, ubiquity is the new exclusivity. You want it to be everywhere. So what I love is that at HuffPost you can have the president of France blogging, and next to it you can have a homeless teenager. And that happened. We had a homeless teenager write a beautiful blog which was seen by the Harvard admissions office, and he's now in his 3rd year at Harvard. And that's, for me, the magic of the world we're living in. The fact that everyone can have a voice, and we want that voice to be heard loud and clear. Everyone can have a good and great idea, and we want to create companies where these ideas can be heard and implemented. And also, we want people who remain connected, not just with each other, not just with talent everywhere, with themselves. Because when we become hyper-connected to technology and disconnected from ourselves, we lose track of our best ideas, of our wisdom, of our sense of well-being and wonder. And we need to change that. And you're in an incredible position to be able to change it in your own lives and to create the cultures that will actually ferment that kind of change and accelerate the global shift that's happening, so that we can all live our lives with more creativity, more productivity, more joy, less stress, less burnout, and yes, more sleep. Thank you so much.